Now I want to talk about identity, because one of the things one learns as a teacher is, what does it mean to be a teacher? What is my identity as a teacher? Okay, you're a native speaker or you're whatever. What does it now mean to be in that situation where I stand in front of a classroom and students have to take me seriously? They see me as a model of English, they see me as somebody who's, or they maybe see me as somebody who's knowledgeable about teaching, knows a lot, and so on. So this struggle of creating an identity for yourself as a teacher is an important one, and often a problematic one for people who enter the teaching profession. And language proficiency has quite a lot to do with it, because if your language proficiency is low, you will have, it will affect your sense, your confidence, and so on. And that's why when we survey teachers and ask them, those of whom are non-native speakers, what's the thing you'd most like to work on? More often than not, they say language proficiency, so closely related to identity. Now, identities, of course, are negotiated. My identity standing up in front of you here is very different from my identity with my friends or my family or whatever. And so identity is something that has to do with the way you present yourself, the role, the image that you create for yourself, has to do with face and all of those kinds of subtle things. And it changes, and so when you step into the classroom, you have to go through a process of identity learning, really, to create that sense of myself as an English teacher. Difficult issue for many people, really. And some people are control freaks. If you talk to teachers, they have different images of themselves. Students have different images of their teachers, depending on the identities that they perceive of their teachers and the identity the teacher perceives of herself. Number 6. When we start out in teaching, we often teach from the perspective of the teacher. We adopt a sort of teacher-centered approach to teaching because we're still mastering content, we're still mastering those skills, we're still trying to be in control. And experienced teachers, some teachers achieve this transition very quickly from teacher-centered to learner-centered teaching. And a learner-centered teacher is seen in the extent of talking, the amount of input that directs the shape of the lesson, the extent to which the teacher's primary occupation is in such things as classroom management, control, and so on. All of these things reflect, if you like, what I'm calling learner-focused teaching. The ability, so good teachers seem to be able to put themselves in the learner's shoes and see what it's like from the point of view of the learner. I did some studies of teachers doing the CELTA course, which some of you may know, and some of the teachers made this transition very early on, some did not. And the way teachers describe their priorities often reflect this view. Here's a teacher who, again, is very teacher-centered in that she's looking at the lesson in terms of how well it reflects her lesson plan. This teacher is much more learner-centered. So his evaluation of the lesson is based on how much engagement it produces with the learners. He's not looking at himself. Not looking at himself. Here again, this new teacher, novice teacher, if you like, who's focusing, if you like, on the lesson plan, is guiding the lesson rather than the way the lesson unfolds. Again, that teacher, every child has the capacity to learn, so he's using that as a driving force of his lesson. So in learner-centered teaching, we're talking about teachers who have these understandings of their learners. They build their lessons around students' difficulties. 7. Now, teaching also requires a specialized form of thinking, bringing some of these things together, because when you're teaching from a learner-centered perspective, you have to restructure the lesson if you like. You look at your potential teaching material and you say, how will I organize that in a way to get the most learner engagement out of it? Now here's a little example of some of the specialized skills that are involved, in which a teacher I asked to create this context for a lesson just using these teaching resources. So all she had was a glass of water, 5 minutes to plan your lesson. I thought that's what I was going to have to do when we started when the machine broke down. So no problem, this is what she came up with. And then now, I often give little tasks like this to teachers in training, and they just jump straight into it often, particularly if there's in-service workshops. What is required, and this is still going on here, that they would then do a little role play. Now, when a teacher does things like this, he or she is calling upon what we call pedagogical reasoning skills. That's the capacity to look at a piece of content, a chapter from the book or a lesson from the book or a set of pictures or whatever is the content that you're going to build a lesson around, to turn that into the basis of a lesson. Which means looking at how it could be used, what goals could I get out of it, what problems might occur, what issues of timing and sequencing and so on might be involved. And this is what is meant by pedagogical reasoning skills, the capacity to pedagogicalize a piece of content, in other words, to transform it, to deconstruct it, and put it together in a different way so it becomes a powerful resource for learning. And that's one of the crucial skills of teaching, pedagogical reasoning skills. And that's why it's very important in schools to have teachers with different levels of experience working together, observing each other, doing shared lesson planning tasks and so on, so that these can be acquired. Number 8. Teaching over time is not just a question of being able to improvise and developing a better knowledge base. It also involves developing a deeper understanding of teaching. And that is what is called theorizing. Theorizing from practice. When you do your teacher education courses, you're taught certain theories and so on about second language acquisition and all that kind of stuff. But when you get into the classroom as a thinking person, working with your own students, you begin to make generalizations to develop from your practice a theoretical basis, a set of principles, if you like. And this is called the theorization of practice. And this is what teachers have in their heads. They may not have articulated them very carefully, but they're there when we explore them through journal writing and so on. And these theories, if you like, are the source of the actions that teachers take. That's why they do it this way, because my theory, I believe in this and I believe in that. So it involves at arriving at generalizations and explanations and developing personal principles in a teaching philosophy. That's why teachers are different. They have different theories, different philosophies. They may teach their lessons very differently but equally effectively. These are some examples of generalizations taken from student-teachers' journal writing. So this is, if you like, the first stage in the theorization of practice. So when we talk to teachers, of course they're full of ideas about how learning takes place. They're always engaging in this theorizing process, reflecting on what happened. Why didn't this work well? Oh, it's because of this. Here's a teacher describing this in a little journal extract here, describing her philosophy, if you like, of teaching. Hope you read fast. Another aspect is developing personal principles. What are the principles that serve as the source of your teaching? So these are examples of teachers' principles, and when I observe a teacher's class, if I'm going to do a classroom observation, I will first ask the teacher, what are some of your principles? What are you trying to achieve in this class? What will I see in the lesson that is evidence of these principles in action? And so these would be examples of teachers' personal principles. And a lot of the time in teacher education, we're exploring teachers with them, having them find out what their principles are, and sometimes, if necessary, asking them if they would want to revise them. Number 9, a community of practice. So in a school, you're working in a context with other teachers. which has its own culture, its own way of doing things. And the term community of practice refers to a group of people in a workplace with shared concerns and shared interests and shared objectives. And so if you think of the place where you work as being a community of practice rather than a bunch of teachers working on their own, then we have a different philosophy operating, a much more effective one. Oops. What's happening there? Telling me time to shut up. So the point about that is that the teachers in a school are the assets of the school. And we need to find ways of acknowledging the different levels of expertise that exist within the school and using that as a source of learning. Now here in Korea I've heard lots of accounts of how teachers do that. There's a very common program in Japan called Teachers Lesson Studies, and some of the people involved with that were in Singapore recently when I was there. And that really basically is just a bunch of teachers working together on planning lessons, teaching lessons, and observing each other's lessons and reflecting on what they learned through that. The community of practice. Come to my last one here, and let's just worn out. See if we get on to the next one. Never mind. Move that on. The last issue I just wanted to raise was the notion of professionalism. Because what does it mean to be an English teacher? What does it mean to be a professional English teacher? And English language teaching is a profession by which we mean it involves standards. It's not something that anybody can do. We have to have a certain knowledge, body of knowledge, a set of skills, if you like, to well done. To be, if you like, a professional. There's two ways of thinking about professionalism. One is the professionalism that is mandated by your local educational authority that says you must have this qualification, you must behave in a certain way, you must dress in a certain way, and so on. So if you like, one way of thinking about professionalism is top-down, what outside organizations require of you, what knowledge and certificates you have to have. That's institutional professionalism, if you like, as opposed to self-generated independent professionalism, which is teachers setting targets for themselves for their own professional development. What do I need to know more about? What skill set do I need to acquire next? And so on, through reflecting on teaching and so on. So in terms of professionalism, we have two parallel strands, and some of the institution in which you're working will hopefully have goals for the institution as a whole to enable it to reach the best quality standards. And so in place will be certain mechanisms, hopefully, for teachers to help achieve those goals in terms of tests, in terms of materials, in terms of textbooks, and so on. But the other side is the personal professionalism, which means being engaged in reflecting on your own teaching, if you like, from the inside and making decisions of your own. So those then are, if you like, the 10 core dimensions of teacher growth, teacher learning that I wanted to share with you, which I summarize as constituting competence and performance as a teacher. And I'm really looking at things that are there throughout the whole career of a teacher, not things that will necessarily be built up overnight. And on my website, which is there, this paper is there for you if you want to have a look at it and other things that may be of interest. Thank you very much.